You're listening to the world's smartest podcast network.
So, welcome everybody. We are at episode 3. For those of you who are counting along at home, I'm sure everybody is marking their calendars. We're at episode 3 of Majoring in Everything. I'm your host, Andrea Jones-Rooy, and today we are continuing our journey of exploring the many ways that you can live your life if you're interested in multiple, potentially, possibly, maybe not so, seemingly unrelated things. Our guest today is someone I'm so excited to have on the show. Mainly, I'm doing this show as an excuse to hang out with my favorite people. Moiya McTier, Dr. Moiya McTier, a warm welcome to you to Majoring in Everything. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Thank you for asking me. I am so happy to be here. So happy to be chatting with you. I feel like every time we talk, I just walk away from the conversation thinking, oh, Andrea is so lovely. I want to talk to you so much more.
Oh my.
So here we are.
Well, pressure's on. I'll see if I can live up to those expectations. Well, the feeling is very mutual, and a common theme with all my Zoom conversations, podcast or not, is like, we should see each other in real life, but we're not, that it'll get done. But thanks to
we'll get there.
The wonders of technology. Here we are. For viewers who are on YouTube, we'll be on YouTube and audio only. Moiya has a killer setup right now for her podcast. Do you want to share with those on audio what they're missing, and maybe they should turn to YouTube if they can, or your description will be sufficient?
Right. Yeah. So I am traveling right now. I'm in a hotel in Boston, right on the freeway. So you might hear some cars or trucks. And I made this, I think, beautiful setup to record. I'm in the hotel closet with a sheet over my head, and my computer and my microphone are resting on top of like the foldy like ironing board thing.
Yes. Finally someone uses those. I tried ironing once and it always burns or catches, it's not usually the best. Very spooky having a sheet over your head in October. Yes. Awesome.
This is my costume.
Yeah, congrats. I'm a podcaster in a closet. That's what I am. So Moiya, there are many reasons to put you on any podcast, I have to say. But one of the reasons, the reason I wanted to put you on Majoring in Everything, in addition to wanting an excuse to hang out with you, is you do lots of things that to the casual observer might be seen as unrelated. So the 3 big ones that I'm thinking about are astrophysics, hold on to your hats, folklorist, or folklore, I guess, and science communication. And I imagine those 3 do not capture the full range of what the Moiya McTier experience is.
I don't think 3 words can capture the full range of any one person's experience, but that does a pretty good job of encapsulating what I do with most of my time.
Excellent. And before we go any further, I want to congratulate you on recently becoming a doctor. That was this year, yes?
Yeah, just a few months ago. And I'm still not tired of hearing it. So
nice.
It feels good.
I can tell you, not to insert myself into this, it never gets old. It absolutely never gets old. One thing I recommend, so let me back up. So Dr. Moiya McTier recently defended her dissertation in astrophysics at Columbia.
Yeah.
Yes. So serious doctor in the house. I will tell you that what you should do if you haven't already is anytime you're signing up for something that might result in junk mail, whether it's especially physical mail, but even email, put doctor in the title, because it will make getting junk mail awesome. I slowly am doing that, and it's great. So I only recently stumbled upon it. So save yourself years of just being regular old Moiya McTier when you could be doctor.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I booked this hotel room, they had a little place where I could put my title or prefix, and I definitely put doctor there.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. It's real power move, but you know what? PhD programs are I was going to say hell, but everyone has their own experience.
It was kind of hell. It sucked.
Yeah. And so what are you doing now now that you've gotten your life back?
Yeah, now that I can be a full real human again, I get to do what I've wanted to do for a long time now, and communicate science full time. And that means a lot of different things for me. So actually practically what I'm doing is hosting my own podcast called Lore, all about fictional world building. I am writing a book about the Milky Way galaxy from its perspective. So it's called The Milky Way, an autobiography. I give talks. I teach classes about world building. I want to host my own TV show. So I'm working my way towards that. Yeah, lots of stuff going on.
if you can't see what I'm doing, actually you probably can't because of the way that this is recorded. I'm like cheering and freaking out. Those are all amazing things. Okay, great. We're going to work our way through time to that endpoint because I want at the end to talk about where folks can find all these amazing projects, follow you, keep track of everything you're doing, hire you to speak, take your classes, all that good stuff. But let us go back to the Moiya McTier, Dr. McTier beginnings-ish. My understanding, having stalked you on the internet and also being your friend, is that you went to undergraduate and you were an anomaly even then. Is that right?
Yes, I was.
Tell us about your anomaly.
I went to Harvard, where I was the first person in the school's something like 300 whatever year history to study both astrophysics and folklore and mythology. And at Harvard, they don't call them majors, they call them concentrations, and they're not double, they're joint. So I joint concentrated in astro and folk and myth. And that was not on the list of pre-approved joint concentrations because Harvard is pretty stuffy. They have lots of lists and lots of rules for how you actually do things. So what I had to do to major in both of these fields was go to the head of each department. Both of these were something like the smallest departments in the school. And I said, neither of you can afford to lose bodies. Let me study both of you, and then everyone wins. But I also had to tell them ideas that I had for a thesis that would combine both of them. At Harvard, if you do a joint concentration, you have to write a thesis that sits at the intersection of your fields. And I thought of a few different ideas. I thought maybe I'd study constellations. That's a pretty easy connection between the two things. Maybe I would look at cosmology myths or creation myths from around the world and see which ones lined up best with our scientific understanding of the Big Bang and the creation of the universe. They didn't like any of those ideas. So what I ended up doing was writing a science fiction novel that was set on a real exoplanet that I studied. I looked up the data and I found the characteristics in my research of this planet. And the plot of the novel was an allegory for the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, because I did a very brief ethnography project in Hawaii around the 30-meter telescope conflict. This is a lot of me talking.
I love it. Keep it coming.
Okay, great. But around 2015, the astronomy community was all abuzz about this 30-meter telescope that we were trying to build on top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii, which is the sacred mountain to Native Hawaiians. And there were different sides. Like some astronomers really wanted this telescope to be built because it was the perfect place to get the precise data that we needed. But there were also Native Hawaiians, who were protecting their mountain and demonstrating there to prevent people from building the telescope. So I just wanted to present those two sides. I'm obviously on the side, maybe it's not obvious, but I am on the side of the protectors. I think that we shouldn't sacrifice people's beliefs and people's sacred religious grounds for science when there are other ways to do the science. Like there are other places that the telescope can go.
Right. So it would be a different conversation. Now I want to have a whole conversation about that matter. And I have followed it only as an outsider. And so have many questions. But yeah, if it were the only place from which we could see any of space, maybe we could have a different conversation. But
right.
My understanding is there's a couple other hills. Anyway, but this is my understanding of astrophysics. So okay. So you ultimately, first of all, people can read this short story. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it's like 70,000 words. So it was
a lot. I don't know how words work.
It's a novella length.
Oh, sorry. So science fiction, not a short story. Science fiction. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a science fiction little novel. I never got it traditionally published and I never really put it out into the world, but it is in a Google Doc or a Google Drive folder that anyone can access. So I'll share that with you, Andrea, and you can send it out to the world.
Awesome. I also love that in your description of how you came to have this major that required mountains of pre-approval from Harvard. Mm-hmm. And pre-approval sounds like the most Harvard thing I've ever heard. So right there with you. You also mentioned science fiction writing and ethnography as by the way, I also did those things in the process of doing this other unusual thing. So A+ on having 10,000 dimensions within the multiple dimensions. So what drew you to astrophysics and folklore and mythology. Why those two fields to begin with?
Yeah, I have done very little in my life intentionally, especially up until grad school. I was kind of just floating along, doing whatever seemed fun or seemed like it would get me to a good place in life. So I started college thinking maybe I would study physics or anthropology. I physically could not find the anthropology building. I am extremely directionally challenged. So I took a physics class, had a terrible experience, and was just adrift for a long time. But one of my friends in the first semester of my sophomore year dragged me to an astronomy course, an introductory astronomy course. And I wasn't interested. I sat in the back of the room. I wasn't going to really pay attention because it was just the first week of classes and we were shopping around. But the professor said we'd get free pizza every week. So I agreed to sign up for the class. You know, I love free carbs, even if I wasn't necessarily sure I loved astronomy. But by the end of that semester, I was pretty hooked. I thought it was really cool that we could study things billions of light years away from our tiny little marble here on Earth. And for the folklore side of things, I have always loved fantasy. I've always loved reading about myths, you know, Greek, Roman, Norse. I had all of the books. In college, I took a class with Moiya McTier, who's one of the country's leading experts on fairy tales and children's fantasy literature. And I literally had one of her textbooks. I got it as a birthday present when I was in 9th grade. And so when I took her class, that was the textbook we had to use. And I was just kind of always meant to study folklore. I think that's what I would do if I was just making decisions based on play, based on what I enjoyed. But my mom always wanted me to be a scientist, and I thought that I could make a big difference in the world by doing science. So I wanted to do both.
So I first of all want to say that anyone who gets a textbook as a 9th grade or a birthday present in 9th grade is a personal hero of mine. So bravo to that. I feel like I need to get a hold of that now. And I also want to say that one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because I hear from I teach undergraduate students, and I hear from a lot of them about, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, where am I going to be? And so I always appreciate candor from folks who are like, yeah, I didn't know. I just did this because it seemed sort of better than this other thing, or I couldn't find that building. And it's shocking to me. I mean, that's how my own life has been, but I never stop being surprised at how often that's a very big part of most of our lives. So wanted to thank you for that. So, okay. So you're doing astrophysics in part because your mother thinks science is a good idea. Props to her. And because you want to make a difference. Okay. But you also are, I almost said indulging, but that's not the word I want. I want a word like honoring your playful, imaginative side and saying, I'm going to do
that's a nice way of putting it.
Oh, yes. Wow. Also, as you're describing all of this with mythology and constellations, and I was just like, oh, the connection now seems obvious to me when you think about how people have used the stars to tell stories that might involve fantasy and things like that. But I've known you for years, and it's never occurred to me that connection is obvious until now.
Yeah, well, it wasn't obvious to me at first either. It's taken me, it's at this point, it's been 8-9 years to really get to the point where I understand how I can connect these things. And I'm still not as good at articulating it as I hope I will be in 20 years.
Right.
When I'm hopefully still doing this stuff.
Right. I know what you mean. People ask me the same, like, what's the connection between and I'm just like, I kind of know, but I don't know how to tell you yet. And I'm a bit older than you, so I'm not probably giving you a very heartening example, but I'll get there. We'll both get there.
We'll both get there.
We'll both get there. And then we'll sit and have a follow-up conversation. You're like, this is the thing that's connected. So I know you as a PhD student who then came to Caveat, which is this theater where we met. I think that's where we met.
Yeah.
Which is a place for performing science-y, educationally smart type stuff in cool ways. And the reason I bring up all of that now is, did you go straight to a PhD program in science from undergrad? What got you? Because for someone, and I say this with my own personal experience, not really knowing where you're going and what you want to do, a PhD program is a very big commitment. Explain yourself.
Yeah. So I grew up in academia. my mom, when I was younger, was getting her PhD in English and finished when I was 14. So I grew up going to classes with her, spending all of my time around college students and professors. And it just seemed like the natural progression for my life to get my own PhD, but I didn't know what it would be in. And honestly, I don't even think I knew what a PhD actually was. I specifically remember my first year of college having a conversation with someone else who lived in my dorm. I was like, what are the different degrees that you can get? Like, what is the difference between a bachelor's and a master's and a PhD? I genuinely had no idea, even though I knew I wanted to get this degree. I had heard that it was the highest degree you can get, and my entire life up until that point, and let's be honest, until this point, has kind of been wrapped around school and being as good at school as I could possibly be. So by the end of college, I was more embedded in the astronomy community. I had done a lot of research on different topics, and I found this question that I couldn't get out of my head. I was wondering where, this is the very simple way to put it, but like, where are all the aliens, right? Like, we talk about habitable zones around stars, but I had never heard anyone talking about habitable zones in the galaxy, and I wanted to know where it would be. So I applied to graduate school to answer that question, and that ended up being my dissertation topic. But I think I wouldn't have wanted to go to graduate school if I didn't have that question in mind, but also I don't know what else I would have done.
Right. And part of that, I know what you mean, not knowing even what you're really getting into. I remember not knowing, and I'm already doubting it, where the period goes in PhD, like P period, H period. Hang on, I think I messed up something on my, okay. All right. It could be that anyone who's watching hasn't been able to see me until this moment, but that's okay because Moiya is the star of the show. And I have my light set up in such a way, or something is happening, that it looks like I'm in a very blue room.
It does look a little blue.
I was like, it looks like I'm signing in from like an ice bar. You know what I mean? Like those ice themed bars. Anyway, all right, we've sorted it out. So, okay, so you go to graduate school, you have a question. I mean, where the aliens are is an awesome question for anyone, never mind just for a PhD, never mind for a PhD program. And did you think at that moment that you were going to be a scientist for the rest of your life, and the folklore was fun and you were going to read that in your own time, and that was that?
Yes, exactly. I went to grad school thinking, all right, this is it. I'm going to be a research scientist or a professor. I'm going to devote the rest of my life to trying to unlock the secrets of the universe. And if I can read some fantasy books in my spare time, then that's cool.
Right. So, spoiler alert, my understanding is that is not where you're headed. And my understanding is based on A, knowing you, and B, what you said at the top of this podcast.
Right. Pretty reputable sources, I think.
Yeah. Top notch, firsthand sources. So at what point did this change for you?
Yeah. Well, grad school is really hard. Grad students have more than 6 times the chance of having anxiety and depression as the general population. This is from a study that came out a few years ago in Nature. And so I was not an outlier. Grad school was really hard for me. And at one point in my second year, like towards the end, I realized I do not enjoy doing research. I don't enjoy this process, this tedious process of checking all the dark corners to see if there are new ways to try and answer a question. It just wasn't something I enjoyed. And at the same time, I was getting more and more speaking opportunities. I was going to Caveat and I was giving talks whenever I traveled for conferences. And I found that I liked that so much more. So I made the decision pretty much then to start ramping up my own science communication work, kind of without telling my advisor and trying to keep it a secret from my department. So that by the time I graduated, I'd be able to do it full time and make money from it. And that was a long journey to get to that point.
Yes. And I want to pause for a moment. And for those who are not in academia, why not tell your advisor the plan? Well, that seems like a big secret to keep.
It was a big secret to keep. And they knew that I was interested in science communication. I said that in my applications to grad school, and my advisor David Kipping, my advisor, David Kipping, is also very passionate about SciComm. He has his own YouTube channel. We had worked together for a long time. We worked together when I was in undergrad. So he knew that, but I wanted to keep the full extent of my SciComm work a secret from them because I was worried they would think I wasn't serious enough about my studies and my research, because they have to make the decision to let me advance through the program. And if at any point they think I'm not committed enough or that I'm not making enough progress, they can kick me out of the program. And I didn't want that, because even though I didn't want to do research, I realized that if I want to do science communication as a Black woman in this world, I need as many credentials as I can get. So I needed to get that PhD.
Yes, those three letters help anyone, but I can definitely understand why it would be even more important for you. So, okay. So, and then I'm so glad you brought this up, because one of the things I've wanted to explore in this podcast is other people's experiences in this. I'm not going to be taken seriously or seen as dedicated or capable or whatever because I have some other interest. And in this case, your interest is not so far afield. Your interest is in telling other people about astrophysics, right?
Yeah. And I consider it the last part of the scientific process. Like, you have to talk about science for it to mean anything in the world. IMO.
Right. For a second, I was like, ooh, what does that mean? Like, oh, I have no IMO. We're caught up. Yes. So I assume you don't have to get into it, but I think this is important because this isn't just an academia thing. I don't think, though. I'd like to hear from folks who are listening if you have alternative views. You're doing your work in graduate school the entire time, right? I don't know what the progression is, but if it's anything like mine, you have qualifying exams and you write a prospectus, which is a proposal for your dissertation, which is your big work, and then you do your big work, and I assume that you're worried about this reputation effect, even though you're otherwise in fine standing. And I'm curious, I mean, is there a mechanism by which they could have said, all right, you're out. We see you flitting around in the Lower East Side at Caveat, or is it more that you would just stop getting their attention, or your advisor wouldn't prioritize feedback for you or whatever?
I did experience that. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I definitely had some tense conversations with my advisor where I felt like he was paying more attention to other students of his than he was to me. I felt like it took him longer to get comments back on my papers, and like we met less regularly than he did with his other students who were planning on staying in academia. And I don't know exactly what the reason for that is. I'm sure it was something that both of us, like a vibe that both of us were giving off, but I felt that happening. And so I didn't want to make it worse by just telling him, oh, I was giving talks like every week. I didn't want him to know that. But there were a few points in my grad school career where they could have off-ramped me from the program. The end of second year report, which I guess kind of stands in for our quals. We don't have a structured written qualifying exam, but you do have to give a presentation and write a report about the research that you've been doing for your first 2 years. And then you have to write a prospectus or a thesis proposal, present that, and ask and answer questions about your proposed research. And at either of those stages, they could have said, you're not making enough progress to stay in the program, you need to leave. I think that that's really unlikely. And I knew that going into the situation. Most people in my program graduate unless they really, really don't want to. It's not like other programs where they try to weed people out after a few years, but I was still nervous. Right. I was still kind of paranoid. So I protected myself and I kept it a secret.
Right. No, and it's not a high probability event, but it's not a zero probability event. And it's the stakes are extremely high because you've put a lot of work into this and then you're out and you don't have those 3 letters that you've been working so hard for and would be so useful. And I want to backtrack, I guess, on what I was saying before, in the sense that, well, you were in good standing. What are they going to do? Right. What I say to my students all the time is that science has a lot of subjectivity to it. And all research is imperfect and has limitations. And I see your point that it probably wouldn't have taken much for someone to decide that the particular limits of your study or proposed work were too great to allow you to continue, even though another person's has the same kinds of limitations. And we see that a lot in my own field in political science. So I'm not sure why I was like, well, you passed the exam, easy. So, right. So, okay. So you spend the last 2 years lying to your advisors,
yes,
secretly running around / I guess the pandemic is hitting, so you're on Zoom giving talks. Who are you giving these talks to?
Yeah, I've given a few talks to academic departments about how they can become more equitable. I've talked to students in academic departments to give them tips for how to survive in academia. And I've talked at festivals about world building, a workshop for how to build fictional worlds based on facts. I've talked at companies, I talked at conferences, any speaking opportunity I could get my hands on. At first, it was a lot of amateur astronomy societies. There are a lot of them peppered around New York, and they would like bring me out. I would take a train, they would buy me dinner, and then I'd give an hour-long talk to a bunch of like old retirees who were interested in space, and it was a good time.
Is it bad that I'm like, I would love to attend that? I'm going to go upstate with you next time. Please let me know. Okay, so I want to talk, world building. What is it? Why is it? Why should we do it? Why should anyone care about it? I assume this comes straight from folklore, but you're writing your own worlds. You tell us, what's the story with world building?
Yeah, this is, I now realize, kind of the passion I've had my entire life, but I didn't have the words to describe it until a few years ago. So world building, fictional world building, is the process of exactly what it sounds like, building a new world, usually for sci-fi and fantasy, but it's useful in so many other regimes. Historical fiction might seem very similar to our world, but any little fictional twists are things that the artist had to create themselves. Anytime you're doing like an interior design project, you're crafting an environment that you want, or a specific atmosphere that you want. That is a form of world building. When you put on makeup, you're doing world building. When you when people in Congress are supporting a particular piece of legislation, they have to do the work of imagining how our world would be different with that legislation in place. And that is a type of world building, any sort of speculative imagining of what would happen if X. That is world building.
That is a lot. That again, I've known you for a long time, and I feel a bit ashamed to say that involves a lot more than I thought. Or it's connected to and touches a lot more, because I was definitely thinking, well, Game of Thrones, got it, right?
I mean, it's definitely in Game of Thrones, yeah.
Right. But a member of Congress sitting there and saying, what would the world look like if, is not something that I thought was in the realm of world building. And it frankly is now, tell me what you think, making me feel like most of science is world building in a sense.
Yes, you're getting it.
yes. Tell us more. More, as I say to my students, more on this.
Yes.
Which I stole from my friend Logan. Shout out. Okay.
Thanks, Logan.
Yeah.
No, so that's my very broad interpretation of world building. Obviously, most of the time it's used in speculative fiction, but I like to be intentionally broad with it because I use world building as my vehicle for science communication, since I base all of my world building on facts. And that science fiction novel that I wrote in undergrad was my first real foray into facts-based fictional world building, because I was imagining this world, but based on real research of the exoplanet. I wanted everything to be as rooted in science as I could possibly make it. And at the time, I didn't know world building as a word. After I graduated, I started teaching workshops that I called letting science inspire your creativity. And it really was the same thing. Like, science and art can work together and be additive in a way that a lot of people don't assume. And then over time, those workshops turned into the world building workshops and classes and podcasts that I have today, where I walk people through the steps that I use to make a world that feels real, but based on facts. And you've done this. You have walked through a world building exercise with me. Together, we imagined what the life might be like on a really volcanically active world, and you helped me imagine the political science of it. Right. So there's a lot there.
Yes,
in
and
world building.
I recommend not just my episode, but all episodes of the Exolore podcast, where you bring on scientists to help you imagine, scientists from all backgrounds, or social scientists very much included. So thanks for that. To imagine what life might be like on a planet with a particular set of characteristics. And it was grim, as I recall.
Yeah, it was a very accident prone world. We also had Mika McKinnon on, who is a geologist, a physical geologist, a geophysicist, that's the word, who specializes in natural disasters, because this world was full of them.
Right. It turns out if you live in a world that might have volcanic eruptions all the time, it's pretty bad. And I think will lead, because everyone's like, well, what about the politics? I think it was super dictatorship-y. Anyway. Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah. But so I'm so excited about all of this for so many reasons. But one big one is that when I think about science communication, I think of the old traditional, which is what I do. Here's a big problem, and here's what scientists think is going on, and here are some interesting results, and yet that kind of like a lecture, but maybe a little bit more drummed up than you would give. This is a totally different way in.
Yes, I do that too. I do the classic sage on a stage type of science communication often, but my favorite way is to trick people into learning without them realizing it. So when you read fiction or when you watch a TV show, you kind of implicitly pick up on the rules of that world. When you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for example, you learn about the history of the Slayer and the Watchers Council, and you pick up those clues. When I build worlds that are based on facts, the things that I want people to pick up are also based on facts. And so they're implicitly absorbing this knowledge about, what makes a world prone to volcanic eruptions, and what are the relationships between the trends of political science and the environment around you. Because what I want people to start doing is making those connections in the natural world that are based on the fundamental truths, the rules of our universe. And fiction is a good way to do that.
Is the main reason because we get bored when we're just learning and being talked at? Is that, I like the idea of being tricked, but is that it? I'm thinking of an analogy. What is it? Jessica Seinfeld, put zucchini in your cookies and get your kids to have vegetables. Is that what's going on?
A little bit, yeah. Part of it is that I think it's boring to do sage on the stage all the time. There is research that shows that people absorb knowledge better when they're laughing, or when they're listening to music, or when they're doing art. And so often in these workshops that I teach, I ask people to make artistic representations of the worlds that we build. And I've done this in classes at Columbia too, where I ask people to make representations of a world we build after they solve equations that decide how hot or cold that world should be. And so, yeah, part of it is just that it's more fun, but I think it's also more effective to get these different, it's not actually different sides of our brain working together, but the artistic side of ourselves and the scientific sides of ourselves, they really do work better when they work together.
So we can actually better understand, better retain, and better further share science or something technical if we have the artistic side swirled up in it. I'm thinking about, and tell me if this is overly simplifying, Jurassic Park and how it made everyone all of a sudden care about velociraptors and really read research. I don't research, but read about velociraptor facts and stuff like that, because we thought they were cool, not because someone was like, well, the velociraptor is the whatever.
No, you're totally right. People see something in a piece of art and it gets them inspired and it makes them want to learn more. Also, they did a lot of great original research for Jurassic Park because they had such a massive budget that they could pay research departments in paleontology to study old dinosaurs. So the reason we know that dinosaurs are related to chickens now is because the movie Jurassic Park funded that research to figure out how their dinosaurs should realistically walk. And I think I read this on like a Tumblr post or something, but one of the people working on the movie saw the scientists saw the simulation of how the dinosaurs walk, and he looked at it and he's like, oh, that looks really familiar. I grew up on a farm. That's how chickens walk. And then they made the connection.
Wow. And that's the actual scientific discovery, because some dude on set was like, oh, I've seen a chicken.
Yeah.
Wow. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Okay.
I mean, fact check me on that, but
okay.
But yeah, that's the gist.
I hope that I'm never going to remember to fact check. That is burned into my brain via this story, that is art and science coming together in the finest form. I also am thinking about how everyone's always freaked out for National Science Foundation grants, and we should be writing to Hollywood and say, do political science the movie. Come on. All right.
I'd love to watch Political Science the movie.
I'll get back to you on Political Science the movie. The key, I think, and you tell me from your expertise, is to have a great, compelling title like that one, right? Like yeah, good.
Title and cover.
Yes, yeah. It's just a person standing in front of a Capitol building. All right. So as you're saying all of this, I can only think three things. One, you're going to save the world. Two, why doesn't everyone talk about science this way all the time, including what's the matter with me? I was in a lecture hall earlier rambling in a regular old boring way. And three, we don't have to get too mired in all of this, but I've been paying attention to the news, not to brag, and it appears there are people out there who are skeptical of science. Is there any way that what you're doing could be helpful on that front?
Let's answer that one first.
Great.
I hope so. It is my greatest mission in life to help people, everyone, understand the world around them better through science. I think that science touches every aspect of our lives, literally from the moment you wake up from an alarm on your phone to when you go to sleep at night. Like there's science of, like you put on the AC because it makes it easier to sleep, right? Like there's science everywhere. And in the world building that I do, and in my other science communication too, I'm just trying to get people to make those connections. I hope that by doing science communication in this kind of weird, hopefully more approachable way, that I can reach more people, people who might deny science, people who might not listen to traditional science communicators and the lecturers, people who wouldn't opt into going to a science lecture on a Friday night. I want to reach those people, which is also why I want to host my own TV show. People watch TV and they don't expect it to be educational if they aren't like intentionally going to documentaries on National Geographic. But when they're just trying to be entertained and they can passively learn something and then talk about this entertaining comedy show that they watched last night the next day on their lunch break, like that's just the type of sticky idea that traditional SciComm doesn't get.
What do you hope that people take away? And I realize that there could be lots of things from this sort of, if you had your own TV show, which first of all, I have no connections to anyone, but if you're listening, Moiya, get Moiya a show. That would be amazing if Netflix was like, oh, we've been paying attention this whole time, and now we want Dr. McTier. Do you hope that people take away, here are some cool findings, here's how science works, here's why you should trust science, all of the above, depends on the context. What's the version here? Because I think in Jurassic Park, we learned, there's some cool stuff about dinosaurs out there, the end, right?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that so much of science communication is trying to give people little factoids about science. When you watch How the Universe Works, they're just like teaching you things. And that is rooted in this belief that Americans, that's where we are, but like most people in the world aren't science literate enough. But when you look at studies by the Pew Center and other organizations that kind of keep tabs on science literacy in the US and the world, you see that people actually have a lot of those facts already. People know that our solar system orbits the sun, and people know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. They know these facts, but the thing that's missing is how those facts are useful for their everyday lives. So in my SciComm, I want to give facts. I'll tell you space facts until I run out of breath, and I love doing that. But what's more important than that is going the extra step and giving people the tools they need to think like scientists. And to get that, you have to give a little bit of information about science. And if they keep that, great. But what I really want them to remember is how to think like a scientist and how to apply the science to their everyday life. And that's why I do world building, because you get to do both.
All right, I'm adding a fourth thing to that litany of statements that I'm just making about you and the world, which is I wish you had been at my family's dinner table in July, because we had some family over, and I'm not going to name names, but it's finally, pandemic sort of waning. We're vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. We got together with some extended family. And one of my family members said, and there are science people, but said, I don't really follow science and math because it doesn't really affect my daily life. And I was just like, but it does. And didn't really have anything further to say other than we're all sitting here because of science and the vaccine. But other than that, so on a daily basis, I know there's a lot more to it than you can say in a few moments, but what, for those listening who don't typically think like scientists or know how this connects to their everyday life, like what are some ways that folks can think about this?
Yes. Oh, there's so much. So a few years ago, when I was in grad school, I taught a lab for undergrads who were not astronomy majors. And I created a curriculum to help them think more scientifically in their mostly humanities fields. So I took them through 10 different modules that each covered a different skill of a scientist that I think anyone can benefit from having. These are things like how to do very quick order of magnitude math, or how to intuit an equation just using logic and common sense, or how to plan, like make a plan when there are a lot of competing constraints on whatever is possible. And I taught those modules. At the beginning of the semester, I had students who couldn't really do algebra. And by the end of the semester, I showed my students a light curve. This is a graph of the amount of light we get from a star system when the planet passes in front of the star. I just showed them that data, and they intuited the equation to find the temperature of that planet orbiting the star, and then solved it. And that seems like a kind of esoteric thing to be able to do. Like, why would the average person need to be able to calculate the temperature of a planet? You're right. The average person doesn't need to be able to do that, but the average person might need to be able to make a budget for themselves every month, which is definitely something that relies on an equation. Like, you can make that. The average person is going to figure out how to schedule their vacation when like they need to do a project at work and their kid has school, and like their partner needs to take care of their mom or something. Like there are so many ways that we can be excuse me, there are so many ways that we can be more quantitative and thoughtful and rigorous in the way that we approach the world. And science is a great way to make that easy. The scientific method is humankind's best way so far of finding the truth and finding right things. So let's use that whenever we can.
Amazing. So 2 things I love about this, among many things. One, I just feel better because I feel like I am constantly shouting about the scientific method, and every now and again, because I don't trust myself, think, am I just saying all of this because it got burned into me in school, and maybe I should think for myself? And then I was like, but I agree. The scientific method is awesome. And sure, maybe we'll come up with a better one, but it's, and people get excited in data science, like, well, it's the end of the scientific method because the machines can figure it out. And it's like, not really, but okay. Yeah.
It might be an evolution of the scientific method.
Right.
Yeah,
My
but we
room
still
is
have science.
it's getting bluer and bluer. What's the science? Is there a star passing in front of my apartment?
The sun is probably setting.
Is this it? Is this the red giant is upon us? And it's
Oh yeah, the end times are near.
Yeah. The second thing I love about this is the next time I am trying to schedule a vacation, or to anyone listening, if you're ever trying to solve one of these very difficult problems of how am I going to get there when this other person has to be here and there's 6 other things happening, and this, which happens to us all the time, that is the same kind of question as figuring out what's the temperature of a star that's passing by a planet. I already forgot what it is, but that
yeah. So what the exercise that I had them do to practice planning under constraints, that was the title of the skill, was plan out an astronomical observation. Because you can only observe a star when it's in the right position of the sky, and there's the right type of weather, and you have the right type of telescope to observe it, given what you want to learn about it. So I had them plan an observation. That's a lot of constraints. And then ask them, it's not enough to do the exercise. You also have to discuss it and like internalize the learning. But then I asked them, where else can you apply this skill? And they each had their own answers that were related to their specific life circumstances. And that was really nice to see.
That's very cool. I've long harbored a suspicion that folks in astronomy and astrophysics just have a better understanding of, I mean, you definitely have a better understanding of the universe. You have the most advanced degree in the world in it, but you must have a better perspective on both the insignificance of our everyday lives, but also the beauty of our everyday lives, because of this connection that you just made between, running errands and the universe. Is that true? Are you enlightened unlike the rest of us? Say yes.
Yes. I do like to think so. That is not to say that all astronomers are like that. I think there are definitely astronomers who are kind of part of the old school. They clock in, they clock out, they think about the data in terms of just like raw numbers, totally divorced from people or what they might mean. There are astronomers like that. But I do think that studying space has given me an interesting perspective on the human experience, because I think on such ridiculously large scales, both in time and space. So I just finished writing the second draft of my book, which is coming out next August. And the book is from the perspective of the Milky Way galaxy. So I had to do this weird mental exercise of coming up with a personality and a voice for a galaxy, and then figuring out from its perspective, what would it have to say about us humans and the way that we experience the world. And what I hope that people get from this book, one of the things, is the large perspective, the overview effect that a lot of the overview effect that a lot of astronauts talk about once they leave Earth and can turn around and see all of it at once. When you think about these really large scales, our petty human squabbles stop mattering as much. And, things like borders are invisible from space. And you really start to see that this is going to sound so cheesy, but you really start to see that we are one human race. And my research was about alien life. It was about where habitable planets are most likely to form. So as part of my PhD research, I had to spend a lot of time thinking about what are the possible extreme different ways that other life forms might exist, like what might their views be. And just in thinking about that, I developed an appreciation for humanity and our planet as something that we own ourselves. No one else has it. No one else can help us with it. It is just up to us to save this big rock that we're on. And so I think that astronomers do get that easier than everyone else.
Yes. I'm going to play everything you just said on loop in my life all the time. That's just what's going to happen. So we're nearing the end of our conversation. And so I want to say 2 things, and then we're going to do what we call here at Majoring in Everything, Existential Corner. So question 1, and I don't know if there's a good answer to this, but what's something about, building on what you just said, what is something about the universe or our galaxy or whatever that is a fact or a discovery or a question that you know about that you wish the rest of us knew or thought about?
Space is really big. Can I swear? Is this a swearing podcast?
Yeah.
Space is fucking huge. So one thing that blows my mind, this is a calculation that early career astronomers are often asked to do. In about 5 billion years, the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy will collide. Each of these galaxies has hundreds of billions of stars. Andromeda has something like 1 trillion stars. And when they collide, we have to do the calculation to see how many stars will actually touch, like how many stars will collide. And even though there are so many, because space is so big, it's only like 5. Only 5 stars will actually touch. And I think that when people think about space in those terms, you know, like the biggest thing we can imagine is the sun, and even that is tiny compared to the universe.
How do you not finish that calculation and then say, well, fuck it, and open an entire bottle of wine and drink it in that moment?
Well, it helps that when I did the calculation, I was 19.
We have that optimism. All right.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to ask before Existential Corner is, so I found myself wondering whether the Milky Way galaxy, what he, she, they, or whatever pronouns, what its relationship with the Andromeda galaxy is. And maybe we need to read your book to find out, which brings me to my question. How can folks keep track of this book? How can we get a hold of it when it's out? I can't wait to read it.
Yes, thank you. So I will tell you, I'll tease that it is a long-term romance with affairs and hopeful dialogue about their future marriage. So that's what you can expect from the Milky Way and Andromeda. You can find me and everything I do on Twitter. I'm GoAstroMo. My podcast is Exolore. So you can find that EXOLORE wherever you get your podcasts. And my website is moiamctier.com. So I'm very easy to find online. The book is supposed to come out in August of 2022. It's tentatively called The Milky Way, an Autobiography. And I am so excited to share it with the world.
Oh, we can't wait. I will post all those links along with the show notes as well. So finally, we're here at Existential Corner. We don't have a sound effect, but there it is. Okay, you can answer or pass any of these questions, or do the politician thing and answer a different question if you wish, that you wish I'd asked. But the idea is it should be one sentence, right? So it's lightning round existential questions. Okay, number 1, what's your biggest fear?
Failure.
Number 2, what is your secret dream for your life?
So the number 1 item on my bucket list that I don't think I'll ever actually be able to achieve is to have sex on all 7 continents.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
Your biggest regret?
Dating my high school boyfriend.
Thing you are most proud of?
Ooh, getting out of my hometown.
Nice. This is an homage to Seinfeld. Do you yearn? And if so, what for?
I yearn for a day when I have nothing on my schedule for like months at a time, so I can just read anything I want.
Nice. What is the meaning of life?
42.
All right. What is the best advice you have ever received or given, if you think you outdid others?
No, I don't give great advice. I also don't take advice very well. So I don't think I have an answer to this one. But
Nice.
Many people have told me repeatedly that I should not let perfect get in the way of good or done. And I'm trying so hard to remember that all the time.
That sounds good. That not taking advice might be the best advice I've ever heard. But if we're going to take advice, that second one sounds quite good. All right. We have 1 minute left. What is a piece of advice you'd give to someone who's currently, say, a scientist and doesn't necessarily know that they want to continue in that path? What gave you the courage or conviction to step aside or step outward or step somewhere?
If you find that you are spending more than half of your days crying, then something's probably not right in your chosen career path. So think about what would make you cry less.
Now that is some advice. All right. We have hit 7 o'clock. I don't know when you're listening to this, but it's 7 o'clock where Dr. McTier and I are speaking. So we will end that there. Thank you so much for talking with us and sharing your wisdom with us. I cannot wait to read the book. You must be given a TV show immediately. And I think you should be in charge of everything. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I am a doctor of the universe, so I can handle it.
Why did I study politics? And I could have studied the universe, probably because I'm not good enough at math. Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for doing the show. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
In your blue room.
It is so blue. I don't know what's happened. I do the same lighting. I don't know. Hold on. Let me stop recording.